When you're ready, we'll start. Tell me when you're running, Mario, won't you? Okay. You are Britain's biggest arms customer at the moment. Do you mean to keep it that way?
If the world situation stays what it is, we have no other choice.
How effective is the cooperation that Britain is doing with Iran at the moment on military equipment?
Well, I think it's very substantial. Most of our armor is British, and we have given you a specification for a new tank, which eventually, when it will roll out of the factory, that day it will probably be the best tank in the world. Why do we do it? Well, we just look around us and see how many tanks are in the hands of some people who one day could eventually be alien to us.
Are you talking about the Russians?
I said all around us.
But even so, we in Britain face a very large build-up across the Iron Curtain in Europe of Soviet tanks facing us, and yet you will, when you have your full number of British tanks, outnumber the British Army itself by, in number of tanks, by 2 or 3 times. Isn't this over-insurance?
Well, I could say maybe you don't have enough tanks.
What?
Just compare the tanks of the NATO countries in Europe with those of the Warsaw Pact.
What do you think? We often wonder in Britain what the Russians are up to, why they have all these tanks. What do you think they're up to?
Well, I can't speak about these things anyway, but I know one thing for sure, and that is throughout history. The military weakness of some countries has been always exploited by others.
Do you see the West then as weak now?
Well, short of an atomic holocaust, you are weak. Except for your atomic weapons, you are weak.
How do you mean? What should we be doing about it?
Well, at least have a balance. Either get down and settle the disarmament question, or establish a balance.
I think, though, I'd like to repeat my former question. The problem for British people wondering how to spend the taxes that we pay, and no doubt for Americans and French and Germans as well, is in really believing it's possible that the Soviet Union is actually going to attack the West. I think perhaps it's not quite credible to many people who pay taxes that we're actually possibly facing a Third World War. Do you really think it's possible the Russians could attack the West?
Again, I can't speak for others, and I can only repeat that a military weakness could be exploited eventually. But if you ask my opinion, I would again repeat what I said before. Either get down and really have a meaningful disarmament, no threat of war, or at least establish a balance.
What do you think the West looks like to you at the moment? I mean, economically, politically, militarily. How do you think it looks? What are its prospects at the moment?
Well, if we take separately each country, some of them are better, and some of them are worse. In the whole, I think that some of the Western countries have not yet found their way for the future. are still in the dark. They don't know really what to do. Lack of leadership. And some of the countries, by just the rule of the eventualities or by luck, are better off.
What about Britain?
Well, that's one of them.
A bit of luck?
Well, patience, luck, that's the North Sea oil, obviously. Your prospects, at least for until the end of the century, is much better. If you just don't waste that money on higher wages, if you invest it in your industry, for instance, modernizing your industry, then you will be okay.
When you last spoke to ITN, you made a point of making it clear that you thought the British people didn't really know how to work. Is that still your view?
You know how to work. The question is that you do not work enough. Just imagine if everybody worked half an hour more per day. That would make all the difference. Effective work. But you know how to work. You have eventually the best skilled workers anywhere.
What do you think is happening in Africa? What do you think Soviet intentions are? Do you think we should be worried about them or not?
Again, it's the same question. When there is a vacuum, somebody is going to fill it. You in the West are just filling your heads, filling your news media and everything by advocating free countries, good members of the United Nations, good behavior, and this and that. But the reality of the situation is not always the same. It's again brutal force, bullying weaker countries.
But do you think the West should be doing that then in response to, presumably you're referring to the Soviets bullying weaker countries? Do you think we should be doing that? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying then stronger countries. Now, how do they get strong? This is something different. But stronger countries are bullying weaker countries. And what can the United Nations do about it?
But what do you think the West should do about it? I mean, do you think that the West should be responding in some way?
The West, when we talk about the West as if, it cannot be as if we talked about an entity. The West is divided, very divided. You can't talk about the West as a whole.
America, and perhaps Britain as well. What would you like to see leading Western countries doing about what you describe as bullying?
At least let know the rest of the world where you are going to stand. If you want to give up all the way, okay, that's your business. But the rest will know where they are.
But by stand, do you mean put in military forces into countries like Somalia and Rhodesia, perhaps, and other places? Or do you mean simply say something?
Yes. Say and mean something. I don't want to be precise about this place or that place. But the resolution of not giving up.
Well, now, Dr. David Owen, only the other day, said that he didn't like the idea of feudal barons, as he described them, moving around Africa with their private armies. Do you think that was enough?
That's not bad.
But you'd like more?
It's a question of I and the rest of the world of believing what you say, knowing that you really mean it.
But I'm sorry to press you on this, but what response is there accept saying it. The idea that anybody might persuade you to unilaterally apply sanctions is not on. Yes. Yeah. Just to take up where we were before. But, sorry to press you on this, but what levers do you think Britain and America and other Western countries have to apply to bring about the kind of statement that you would like them to bring about? How can they do it?
Well, you know, you feel these things very easily by your actions followed by deeds. For instance, if you talk about a policy of stand and at the same time decrease your military spending, no one would believe you. As I said before, I'm all for world disarmament. But until the day that we have not reached that agreement, the question is to have a balance. So if, as I said, your words are followed by deeds, one would believe you, obviously.
But do you understand sometimes the slight dilemma that some Western leaders feel about a very close relationship with your government, when there are some in America and in Britain too who feel that your regime is undemocratic? How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying that your regime are not more democratic than ours, because in the name of democracy you make things that we are horrified about it. There is no equality between people. There is more difference of standard of living and wealth between your people than our people.
Is that so?
Well, just look how many billionaires you have and how many poor people you have. Here, the wealth of the country, at least we are subsidizing 5 items of food. All the education is free. Throughout the university, we are even paying pocket money to the students.
Well, let me put it to you that Mr. Callaghan doesn't work in an office like yours. How do you respond to that?
Mr. Callaghan is a prime minister. I'm the king of kings of a country which has 2,500 years of monarchy. But this cannot be also compared to Buckingham Palace. The price of Buckingham Palace is 100 times more than the price of this one.
I believe you have more than one palace around this country. So is the Queen, you might say. But nevertheless, you make a point about the difference in wealth between billionaires, perhaps in Britain and America, and the poor. I would suggest to you there are also very rich people in Iran and very poor people in Iran. But isn't the point that...
In the old days, you, British, and others who had influence here, you could change the prime ministers as you wished. Are you sorry for that time that you have lost? Do you want the same thing? To manipulate our internal affairs? We won't let you.
What are you going to do about the Concorde? You have 3 options. Are you going to buy them?
I wish we could, because it could be an ideal plane for my country, located almost in the middle of Tokyo and London. And especially if we could make the tour, Tokyo, Tehran, London or Paris, New York, Los Angeles, and again Tokyo. That would be fantastic. But the question is that it should pay. I mean, it should be an economic plane. We wouldn't buy a plane when we would be sure that we are going to lose money.
So?
So it has to be proven, maybe the extended Concorde, which will take a few additional seats. Or if we go into your books to see what you are doing over the Atlantic, which is obviously the best course.
So you might possibly do some joint arrangement with British Airways, you say?
After